Today we're going to talk about the concept of a derivative, but a really foundational piece that we need to talk about before we talk about derivatives is the idea of a slope. So what I have here is just a line, and we're going to talk about its slope. So what a slope does is it describes the line. It tells you the steepness of the line, it tells you the direction the line's traveling, if it's in a positive direction or a negative direction. So how would we figure out the slope of a line? There are multiple ways to do it, but the most common is to use 2 points. Let's say we have point x1, y1 and point x2, y2. And the nice thing about lines is that no matter which points we pick, the relationship between these points will always stay the same. So when we talk about slope, we talk about the change or difference in the y. So how much difference is there in the height between the 2 points? And then we also talk about the difference in the x's. So how much difference is there in the distance between the 2 points? The formula that's used is just that. We take the difference between the y's and the difference between the x's. And no matter which points, this rate or proportion will always stay the same. And I want to point out that you can think of it as a rate. Remember that a rate just compares 2 different things. And so here we're comparing y's and x's. Let's think about a rate that you're probably much more comfortable or used to seeing, which is the idea of speed. If you were driving, let's say you left at noon, and then 5 hours later you stopped driving and you ended at your destination. If during that time you ended up driving 500 miles, you could figure out at what rate you were traveling. And finding out what rate is the same as finding a slope, and this is why. It doesn't look like we have points right now, but if you think about it, when the trip started, you hadn't gone any miles. So you could say that you started at 0 miles. Alright, so we could think of this as 2 different points. Alright, now normally when we find your speed, it's miles per hour, right? Miles over hours. So what we're going to look at is how many miles and how many hours did it take. So it took 500, or you drove 500 miles, and it took 5 hours. So what you can see here is this is your change in y, which is 500, and here we have your change in x, which is 5. So if we divide them, the 500 miles by the 5 hours, we can find out that the rate you were traveling at was 100 miles per hour. And I like this because it kind of shows you how rates are the same thing as a slope.